So to Henry Draper, Managing Partner of Albany Partners.
Thank you.
Seamless.
Seamless, look at that. As if by magic. Thanks for the intro. As Lee John said, I'm Henry Draper. I'm the Managing Partner of Albany. I have the enviable privilege of chairing the final panel discussion for today. I think it's otherwise known as the graveyard shift. So I'm standing in the way in between you and some beers afterwards, so just bear with us. The topic that we'll be covering is navigating the dual role, CTPO versus CTO. And I think it's a really current and quite prevalent topic. Before we get started, I probably have a minute. I think I'm allowed about a minute of shameless self-promotion, so I'm going to go for it. For those of you who don't know, I'm on the clock. Okay, go. For those of you who don't know Albany, we're a specialist recruitment company and executive search business. We solve hiring challenges in tech and product at every level. We exclusively work with tech companies that are backed by venture capital and private equity across Europe, whether that is tech advisors, product advisors, fractionals, executive interims through structured executive search services, so CTO, CPO, and the VP level that sits underneath. And then we build teams underneath VPs of engineering and VPs of product. So a message to the community: if you are looking at the market, need guidance and advice, whether it's how to manage a process, where do you go, where do you look, what should you be looking for, if it's guidance on your career progression, or indeed if you're hiring, then come and tap me up. I'll be out in the foyer, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Now let's meet the panelists. We have, in order, Natasha, Tom, Hizam, and Mario. I will let you all introduce yourselves and maybe a little bit of a brief on the topic. So your general thoughts on it to start off with.
Okay, so I'm Natasha. I've been working in the industry for 15 plus years now, and I come from France. I've worked lately as a CTO in a Fintech for 4 years, and at the moment I'm working with an organization that is called l'Observatoire de la Fintech, where we conduct studies on and analysis and the trends on the fintech industry, primarily in France, but also in Africa and Asia. And with some of my colleagues from the Observatoire de la Fintech, we also run a consultancy firm where we offer C-level services, fractional C-level services like a CFO part-time compliance, but also CTO, since I'm a CTO. And there I work with early stage fintech startups about their product and tech strategy, and also about everything that is related to mentoring their CTOs. So that's why I'm really interested in this topic about the dual role CTPO versus CTO, because in those early stages companies, sometimes or a lot of times you have to do a lot of things at the beginning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So my name's Tom. I've been working in tech industry somewhere between 20 and 25 years. I've lost count a little bit. Started off as a software engineer originally. Last 7 years I've been working in a C-level role. And that's been a mixture of CTO and CPTO, where I've had product reporting under me. Majority of my experience is in financial services. But at the moment I'm taking the CTO program at University of Cambridge up until February next year. And yeah, why this topic is interesting for me is because obviously I've been in the mud, let's say, and yeah, I'm really interested in exchanging views and experiences and learning from each other.
Thank you. Hizam.
Hi there, I'm Hizam. I would consider myself a product-centric technology leader. I've got about 20 plus experience in R&D, software development, etc. I've been in both CPTO and CPO roles. I've also been in environments where it really worked. I've also been in environments that didn't work so well. So I'm super excited to share some of my experience and learn from the rest over here.
Yes, hello, my name is Mario. I had a little bit of too much of those fantastic cake out there, and I'm trying to find a comfortable seating position. Excuse me. Yeah, well, I'm a Berlin guy since the 70s. I can't believe it myself saying this, and kind of a nerd since the 80s. So currently, I'm CTO of krisenchat. We are #1 in GSA countries and the Ukraine in psychosocial instant counseling for especially young people.
Thank you, thank you. And you know, from where I sit in the industry, it is such a prevalent topic. You know, we get asked by our clients at various stages of growth the validity of merging technology leadership and product leadership roles, and my answer is always the same: yes, but it depends, and it depends on so many different things. And that's something that I'd be keen to really cover today. What does it depend on? So to go into the first question, what factors determine whether a company should merge the roles of a CTO and CPO into a single CTPO position, particularly in relation to the company stage, scale, complexity, or industry?
Well, I can start.
Yes, please.
Since I've been working with early stage fintech startups, you will see that it's an environment that is very constrained. You don't have a lot of people. You don't have a lot of money. Most of the time, maybe you will have the CEO who has like this product knowledge, but in the meantime, he has someone who has to implement. And in order to implement, you need to have a good understanding of the product. So that's where sometimes, at the beginning, you will have someone who will be wearing those two hats at the same time, because this is what is needed. The company cannot do more than that. And I will let the others answer, but I think also depending on the complexity of the industry you're working in, maybe at the you don't need a special or a very specific knowledge of the industry, and then you can wear those two hats as well. And yeah, I'll let you continue.
Yeah, so I think exactly what you said, Natasha. There, it's like the size, the industry. It's how tech product is. So how much tech is in the product. How it focuses on that. The maturity, the life cycle stage of the company. But I think that in my experience, one of my experiences was there was just a gap in that area, and then it's like as a CTO, you're kind of, I see it as you're the oil in the engine trying to make things run well and steering as well. But if you're not getting what you need for the tech team to be able to build a great product, then you step in and fill that gap. And I think that's where a lot of these roles just kind of emerge, is that gap's seen, and rarely you're asked to take it on. You have to just go for it and do it until somebody tells you not to do it, right? And try to make it work.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's all of the above, and if I had to choose one, it's the capabilities of the team that you have and the interest. If it's a product-centric or tech-centric product, such as a platform that requires a lot of integration to your customers, and most of the economic buyers are CTOs or CIOs, I think it would make a lot more sense for the CTO to play that CPO role as a CTPO and engage with these customers. And in other times, sometimes you want the CTO to focus a lot more on replatforming or fixing something that's going on in the infrastructure or the architecture. Then you want another person who's a CPO who could take over some of that external responsibilities. So it's all about what are the problems that you're trying to solve. And you don't want to just do it because of the sake of having another person and then ending up introducing a new problem.
We were thinking about finding, or I was hoping to find a formula for you, maybe to have like a formula with 3 variables where you can say, okay, I have this formula, I can place in my variables and I say, I have the yes, no answers. Do I need a CTPO, a CPTO, a CTO, or a CPO, or a 3 CPO, whatever you favor. I have to disappoint you if we didn't find such a formula, but maybe we can talk about that evolutionary process where you probably maybe have been. But maybe you already are a CTPO without knowing, when you start a company, when you start maybe with a few people, 10, 20, 30 people, there's a void, right? We talked about, and you get sucked into this void. So this void is probably the product environment, and there's no dedicated product structure inside the company. You're probably already fulfilling this as a CTO because everyone is expecting you to do that. And this is maybe a chance also to get into the CTPO role, as I see this, to start experimenting with that. But I guess you need some knowledge, some skills, how to build that kind of structure. And but yeah, this void is something like if we ask for how to how to get there. So this would be maybe something like a evolutionary process.
I think you're definitely right, and what we see in our industry, where we're consulting with clients around their current environment and so the status quo, if you will, and what their value creation plan is, what's their business strategy, how are they going to grow. You can quite easily identify whether they've got the right skill set internally. And in a very early stage business, the founder might be owning the product vision, for instance, and they might need somebody that's more of an execution arm of product. So, in leading effective product management processes and make sure you've got that harmonious relationship between the two functions. And I think in that instance, it might be a viable option. I think that we're often talking about two different profiles when we're talking about CTPO. We're either talking about a product-centric technology leader, so CTPO, or we're talking about a technology-centric product leader, CTPO. So I think there's quite a lot of complexity around the topic, and I don't think so. My answer being it depends. I think there's a lot that it depends on. But what I'd love to know and get a view from you all is, as this role becomes more common, what unique challenges do you think will arise from merging these roles together, and can they be addressed effectively?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. So what do you think are the challenges that arise from merging the two roles together, the two functions together?
Okay. So you mentioned that, like in your previous comment, like if you have someone that is very tech oriented, has this tech experience, and you ask him to take the product hat, how can he manage the two roles like equally? Will he be very good enough to cover the two different topics? So that's one of the challenges, and if you have someone, and vice versa, because if you have a product person that is taking like the technical part, how much of technical knowledge that person will have to be legitimate enough to run technical teams, to talk with them, and also how that person but for that we are also going back to the eternal discussion between technical and the excom, how much business acumen this person has in order to be able to translate all the technical and product challenge to the excom.
Agree.
So I'd put it to three aspects. I think the first thing is that, and I'm coming from the CTO going into the CPTO role, just from experience. First thing is that you have to have understanding of the business. As you really have to understand your business, because you need to be able to speak the business language. So that's a challenge, I think, as a CTO coming typically from a technology perspective. You have to learn to speak the business language to operate on that level. Secondly, is you need to understand how to do product development, right, and what that entails, and the frameworks and methodologies. And I think third thing is, for me, there's always this barrier of friction. And a lot of companies that I've worked in, that's between business and technology, just as two silos, let's say. When there's problems, or the requirement's not quite right, you're not sure where you're going, strategy, something breaks, And I think with where you're taking on the ownership of the product team as well, that barrier of friction kind of shifts. Yeah, so maybe it's between product and technology, and this kind of healthy friction that you get between CPO and the CTO. And when that's under one hat, then actually that kind of barrier of friction shifts more then between the business and the product and tech organization. But I see it as like, and I always try to come up with analogies to relate to, and I think it's a little bit like a Formula One team. So you have the mechanics. The mechanics are also the pit stop crew, right? And so, but you've got the people back at the factory manufacturing the components, right? And so, whilst you as the mechanic are also then doing the pit stop, if a component breaks or whatever, what you don't want to be doing is then, blaming the factory for providing poor parts and so on. What you want to do is realize that actually you're still one overall team and you win or lose together. And so it's about making sure that, yes, you might be taking product and tech ownership over, but you've still got to operate as an overall team altogether because you, as I say, you're going to win or lose together.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it comes down to the culture and again, like the problem, because you mentioned merging the two roles together. So I'm assuming at start there was two people, one running CTO and the other running CPO. If there's a need to merge it, there must be a problem that's being presented. And perhaps that's an attempt to solve that problem. I could share an experience where there was in one point where there was a lot of conflict between myself and the CPO. It was just not working out the way we'd liked it to work. It almost felt like the engineering organization, the CTO, was an execution arm for the CPO. And I don't think there's anything right or wrong about it. If both the CTO and CPO has built the trust and they believe that's the best way to work, by all means, let's do that, right? And from a business perspective, if that's not what they're aligned on and it's starting to create overhead and it's starting to become a problem for the business, then it's going to be the choice and the decision of the business to either merge that two to solve that problem or find two other individuals that could work better together, right? So I don't believe there's a right or wrong answer here. It goes back to like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because at start, when the company starts, you have a CEO and maybe a CTO where the CEO is actually driving the product. And the CEO is helping the CEO, or the CTO is helping the CEO to execute on the product. And as the company grows, the CEO starts to become quite busy with speaking to the board, the investors, the roadshows, and they become less of a product manager, or they come in and out infrequently and becomes very disruptive for the team. Someone needs to wear the hat, right? It doesn't go away. So if the CTO is naturally inclined to wear the hat, they become the CTPO. But sometimes they just don't have the skill sets, or they've never learned how to become a product manager. Then it makes sense to bring someone to help them out.
I don't know who said that. I was thinking about that. Was it Goethe, Schiller, or I don't know, Ice Cube? There are two hearts in my breast beating. So if you can't take this, probably having two hearts in your breast, probably it's not for you. And then you ask for challenges, right? So what are the challenges? So there are two challenges. One for the prospect CPTO probably. So those let's say internal intrinsic challenges the person faces. So skill set, of course, all that. But also from the other perspective, who's hiring executives? So I don't know who is. So depending on the organization, probably a CEO or a managing director, something like that. So there's also the challenge that they need to know when to hire whom, and to understand the domain, what they're trying to solve with the particular position. So I think this is one, maybe even a bigger challenge, that they know what they are doing. Are they now addressing solving a problem with the CTPO role, or are solving a problem with both roles? So is the CTO maybe having a head of engineering and a head of a product below them? And then we have the same situation maybe, then we just address it one level lower, and they may be fighting the fight they were fighting before and then level higher. Those are maybe the challenges. And also maybe something, I think the CTO role is more than just being head of engineering, right? This is a head of engineering is one part. As a CTO, you're also responsible for many other things. Everything which beeps, blinks, makes noises, I don't know, is potentially digital. It's something in your domain, except if you have someone else doing it. If you don't have a CISO, you're probably also the CISO, right? So you need to take care of all the security and data privacy. If you don't have a privacy manager, you probably also need to take care of, because everyone thinks you're the digital guy, you know how to solve that. So those are the challenges I had in mind, additional to those things you said.
I think just referencing something that's on Slido now, and then something that you said, Tom, about the friction. We often describe it as a healthy tension between CTO and CPO, and that negotiation that happens between them, and that's one of the arguments for keeping them separate. Do we need that? Is that a legitimate answer, or can we merge those two together? And if we do need that healthy tension and you put it under one roof, how do you negotiate with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in there, having had this experience, right? Is that I would argue that when you come from a technology perspective and you go towards the business side, so you then take on the product responsibility, your main task is to understand the business and operate with the business on a strategic level, leadership level, where you can talk their language and translate that into then, okay, how do we get the product? What is the product? Why are we building it? Who are we building it for? And so on, and answer all those questions. And I would argue that when I've moved into that role, I'm all about bringing in great people into the roles, on both sides of the teams. But I'm more kind of then challenging on the technology side, saying, hey, why can we not build this faster? Do we really need to be, gold plating it? Do we need to build this? So I'm not sort of playing from the CTO background that I come from and sort of saying, okay, forget about the product, technology rules. I'm actually going the other way in terms of I understand the business need better and the dynamics there and the levers. And I'm more champion for pushing the product side forward. So I think that actually gives a healthy self-balancing aspect, because you have respect for what happens on the technology side, but at the same time you've learned to appreciate the needs on the business side and on the product side, so you're driving those forward as well.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if I necessarily look at it as a tension that needs to be introduced. I see it more as a gap that needs to be closed, right? Like if the teams are really hyper focused on output, it tells me that they're probably missing the point of why they're building, and they don't understand what is the purpose of building a particular tech. And oftentimes it may be easier to introduce a product manager or a CTO to help close that gap, right? Like, hey, we're building this because this is how it's going to solve a customer's problem. This is the value what the customer gets. Why is it aligned with the business goals and direction? And here's how we're making money. So I think from the previous presentation, I think one of the things that improve productivity is actually helping the teams close that gap, right? Like really helping them understand like why you're building. So I see the role of a CPO sometimes also being that coach, right? Rather than telling the team what to do, is like helping the team understand, okay, here's why we're doing it, here's what the value customer needs, and helping them measure the right metrics, so regardless of how they build it, they're heading in the right direction.
Do you think this could be the natural evolution of the CTO role?
Well, I mean, I believe that's an expectation that's put on the CTO, right? But not everybody has that skill set. So maybe having a CPO helps the CTO become complete. I look at it more like a joint in the hip and sharing some organs. So you can't necessarily like split it out. And I don't even look at it more like having a straight line. There's a lot of overlap, and the overlap keeps moving depending on the time, the stage, etc. So it's for that two individual to figure out, we're sharing organs here, like how are we going to live together?
I mean, just to chime in on that, so quite ironically, or as a tangent to this, the CTO program at the University of Cambridge, there's zero talk about what programming languages, technologies, and so on. It's all about leadership, culture, business strategy, and a culture of innovation. How do you build that? So I would argue that the modern day CTO, or the CTO of the future, is one that actually understands the business more and more than they have done in the past.
Someone asked I don't see it anymore. Someone asked the question regarding a CDO. I think this fits very well. I hope you mean with CDO a delivery, right? So delivering a value to someone, to customers. How about that? Yes, thank you.
Do we mean digital, data?
Digital.
Or digital.
Digital. Or data.
Okay. Data.
Data.
I think of delivery because I like to. I don't know if you know. Are you familiar with delivery? So saying delivery, many people are now switching to. I think maybe you, Rachel, right? Yeah, maybe talking about delivery, right? So it's something more important, delivering value, right, to our customers. And I think this is maybe a good point. Even if you meant something different with the CDO, in my translation, it's still a delivery. Yeah, and I think this is a good shortcut to or good to memorize to thinking being a CDO in terms of delivery, not data.
So I guess for the benefit of the audience, majority here being technology leaders, how do you best prepare yourself for a CTPO role?
I think we've talked about that, like having this business acumen to understand what you are doing and why you are doing that. I think you need to be very curious about your environment, not only about the technical part. It's good to know about the latest trend, the latest technologies, everything that is happening on the tech scene. But in the meantime, you have to understand why you are building things. So you have to develop that curiosity. And also, and I think that is important for every one of us, to be very self-aware. You need to know what are your skills, where you are strong, where you are weak, and be humble enough to know that you cannot do anything and you cannot be the best at everything. So when you are aware of that, you will know, okay, these are the gaps that I need to fill, and I will hire the right person to help me. So for instance, if you are the CTPO, so you are supposed to be like the referee. You are talking about the tension between tech and product. Normally, if you are a CTPO and you are running those two teams, at the end of the game, you are the one that will say, okay, this is where we are heading. This is what we have to do, and for that, you will need to have also. You need to be able to count on strong lieutenants. You will have a strong VP of technology, a strong VP of product, and they will be able on their side to focus on the operational part of their work, and they will help you free your time to be able to work on the strategic alignment of those two streams.
I'm pleased you're talking about hiring more people because we can help there.
Yeah. But most of the time, sometimes when you go for a CTPO role, it's also because you need to save money.
We get that a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, as a cost saving measure, I think CEOs, founders saying we've lost somebody, maybe we can put them together. Will that work?
And if you look, for me, it's a trend. Like for the the last 18 months or 2 years, I see that there is a trend of having a lot of CTPOs, and I think it's also because we know how the funding. We have less funding. We are very conservative on the budget, so maybe that's why also we have more and more of those these days.
Like getting back to answering your question around how do you prep someone to that CTO or CPTO or CPO role, like, I think regardless of what it is, as you get into a C-suite level, it's a lot more about horizontal relationship and trust building rather than your vertical relationship with your teams. Because you are there in the first place because you are good at that vertical, right? Otherwise, you probably won't be there. So I think you want to really prep yourself. How do you work with the CFO? How do you work with the sales team or CROs? How do you work better with the CEO? It's all about building relationship. I think I borrowed this from the table group. It's we're smart, right? Like, but how do we become healthy as a team? And this concept of team one, that's your like horizontal team, and then you keep going down to your vertical team, right? So that's what I felt that was the biggest gap for me because I was really good at writing programs and doing the tech stuff, but as first started to get into the C-suite, it's like, wow, there's a lot of gap here. It's like just the language itself needs to change. Right?
Interesting. So you mentioned team being member of a team. I think your team as a CTO is not the engineering team. Your team is the C-level, the executive team. So this maybe changes something in the mindset. So this is your team. You should be talking to them a lot. Also asking here, Ms. Matthias here, I don't know, a great thing about feedback, right? So ask them those questions, those 3 questions. So where do I suck at? And all those things are really, really productive, and they will make you a better you, and probably make you also leaving your comfort zone. I did that too, so I went through that. So it's really good. I recommend it. I'm not a dedicated CPTO or CTPO, but I knew how it felt like when I was building up or co-creating maybe an organization, so that you kind of, as I said, being sucked into the void, and you're there, and then you have to hire people like doing UX, UI design, user research, and you're basically building up a product department. But still, yeah, I was lacking. I was not good at that point, so I was lacking some product skills. But the best thing was what I could do is learning from super experienced CPOs. So if you have the luck and you have a super experienced, seasoned CPO there, be the best friend, probably, and go have some beer or tea together and try to really ask, how can I get better, and how can I get your job? maybe they'll help you.
I want to go to one of the questions from the audience. Florian's question. It's had 30 thumbs up, so that's obviously a popular one. Why have CPO, CTO roles separated in the first place? Merging avoids conflict between product strategy and delivery sustainability. Good question.
I will say it depends, because that's what we said in the beginning. Sometimes they are not separated at the beginning, because you cannot do, you don't have a lot of people, you don't have a lot of money, so you have to do with the people that you have. So you will have, and I think most of us who have worked in early stage startup, you know that you do everything. You do something, things need to be done, so you are here, you are there, you just do them, and maybe at some point you will separate those. But again, it won't be the case, for instance, if you are in a very I was talking about, where you need to have a very particular expertise depending on the industry. If you're working, I don't know, in genetics, for instance, you're working in the pharmaceutical industry. Even in finance, you have some very particular financial services which require a very particular and deep expertise. So there you will need to separate the 2 roles. But again, I think it was Hizam who was talking about when you have a product that is it's like a technical product, technology-centric product. For instance, a SaaS platform, or a product that is designed for CTOs or CIOs. This morning we were talking about, ecos that is dedicated, how you want to, when you want to manage your teams, your engineering teams. So in that case, I think it's a natural role for the CPO, because for the CTO to be, or for a dual role, because he's making a product that he could eventually use. So he can take the place of the final user, the end user. So it's good to, if you have enough money, and if the context of the industry allows it, if the maturity level of the company allows it, why not? But if you work in a constrained environment, and then maybe you will have to sorry. So if you don't have enough, if you don't have enough money, you just do the dual role. If you can separate them, you will have to separate them. But even if you have one head like the CTPO, you still have 2 different teams, like 2 different teams in one, 2 different streams. You will have the technology stream and the product stream. So, and roles will be always separated, but you need to define those roles, define the responsibility, who is accountable of what, and as a project, in every project, who is doing what, who are the stakeholders. So you need to define that, whether it is under one person or 2 different people.
Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to a company I've been in I've worked for big companies, corporate companies. I worked for a lot of startups as well. I don't think any of them have had a CPO when I've arrived there. I would argue it's somewhat a relatively new function as product as it is known today. So I would say rather than it was, talking about having them separate, it's more about talking about at the beginning and then merging them. I think it's more about having, what's the right time to split them, right? And sometimes the product can be driven from the CEO side, or the business side, traditional business side, could be driven from the technology side. And I think this then starts to become a question about how spread you are. Can you continue your influence and impact on the level that you want it to be for the size of the organization, the breadth of products that you have, the team that you have. And I think at some point, as a CW, you always, there are, I guess, executives that are more like, okay, the more I own, the better I am. But actually, I would argue that's not the case, right?
The empire builders.
Yeah, exactly. It's about what can you own that you can deliver the impact that you want. And that means there's also a maximum to that where you're not able to, and it makes sense to bring the right people in or to elevate the people from within the organization to take that over.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes it's a scalability issue, right? Depending on how much capacity the CTO has. I think between the CTO and doing some parts of the CPO is going to be easier, but there's other parts of that which is a bit more closer to the CEO role around managing sales, marketing. You want to do sales enablement, product marketing, and sometimes the CTO just may not have those skill sets or would be a steeper curve to kind of climb. So depending on the capacity, right? Because once you have a product strategy, now you want to be able to make sure it's aligned with the product marketing. You want to go and enable sales so they're selling the right stuff. It's a lot of things to do. And as you grow and scale, it may or may not be a job for the CTO anymore, right? Because what is your passion? If you want to drive technology, innovation, you want to give up some of that. So it makes sense to have two people.
I think there's an interesting question by Anonymous on Slido. Seems like a panel biased towards taking on a CTPO role. Would be great to hear about the downsides. Mm-hmm. And I think the question below it also infers the downside of cognitive load, increased load.
I could talk about downside. I've been a CTPO or maybe a CT with an invisible P in there. I had the entire product management team reporting up to me. I was just not doing technical stuff anymore. It was a lot more of the CPO role, right? Working with sales, working with marketing, working with the commercial teams, with the CEO. And luckily enough, I had a strong engineering leaders that I just completely backed off, right? So at that point, it's just easier to not call it CTPO, just call it CPO.
And you mentioned like cost savings, right? In the beginning of those questions. I'm not sure. I sometimes like to do those thought experiment on how things scale, right? So whatever it is, a question, a challenge. So how does it scale in both directions diagonally, right? So if you think about those two questions one before, then what would it look like if we had a market where we had only 5 companies in Europe, doing tech, so they could hire anyone who they would like to, and they probably would be someone who's doing both worlds perfectly, and maybe the whole engineering department would be also people who will be in both worlds perfectly. I mean, very, very good in both worlds. But we don't have that. We have a real world. So we probably, that's why maybe it was also separated, because so many companies emerged and they needed those kind of structures. And also a copy and paste mentality is very common, right? So a CEO heard something from the other CEO and said, oh, we need that and this. And then they want to copy and paste it into the company because it's kind of in. And this was what I perceived throughout, let's say, the last two decades, that this happened. And if we had a market where we only have 5 companies, it would be probably a different. So
I would.
Sorry, I would say also one of the downside can come to the personality of the the person that is taking the role. Because if you have someone who is not self-aware or who has a tendency to, to decide everything by himself, who's not collaborative enough, then you have the risk of falling into an autocracy or like a dictatorship, because he will be like, okay, I'll just decide everything. It's like this because, okay, I decide for the tech, I decide for the product, and there won't be any collaboration actually between the team. And then you will have the downside is that the teams underneath him are going to be frustrated because they are doing a lot of things, but their voice is not heard.
And I also think it's beyond the tech and product, right? Like I think the downside of CPTO is if they are coming from a tech background, sure, they empathize better with engineering and tech, but are they going to be empathizing better with sales and marketing and commercial, right? So I think that's also another downside. So sometimes I feel a better combination is, or a CPO, especially coming from the sales organization, can be a better partner for the CTO. But they empathize really better with the customers.
I mean, I would argue what you were saying, Natasha, that it depends on the leadership style of the person in that role. I don't, certainly for me, my leadership style is not about making the decisions, right? It's about enabling the team to make decisions, but of course there's conflict and you have to be prepared to step in and do it. But I would say downside of this particular, to this question would be a lot more sleepless nights, right? Because you're ultimately responsible for more numbers, more people, more topics going on, and it's okay, there are only 24 hours in a day. How do you split your time across the most important topics to uphold your responsibility? Because at the end of the day, you are accountable for it. So an excuse isn't, well, you own both product and technology. Oh, it's too much for me. It's like, well, so that doesn't fly, right? So I think that would be the downside of it, is that you've got to work out over a wider breadth of topics where to spend your time, where to make yourself available for your team so you can help them out when they're stuck with something. And I think ultimately you achieve that, right, by delegating, by enabling your team to act on such a scale. And you can just help them, when needed.
Thank you. Anything to add to that point?
Maybe to adding to my thought experiment, maybe if you think also about corporate, right? So how do they organize their organizational structures? Do they have a CTO at all or not? Does IBM have one CTO, a global one, or not? So how is it structured? What are they solving on the top executive management? What kind of problems are they looking at? So maybe this also helps sometimes understanding what you are solving in your company. Also, there are different organizational approaches to solving all those kind of things. You said hats, right? They're just hats. You can name them anyhow. And we also discovered. So I thought it's a delivery. You said it's data. So all those C something O's are just naming something to cover all the things we need to cover in an organization. You can name them anyhow. Maybe you remember them in the future, like 1, 2, 3, 5, and then it's easier.
I think question 2 on Slido is quite interesting from JP. I think the CPO is born out of the CEO, not the CTO. Is this a dangerous misunderstanding at this point? That's a great question.
It depends.
I would argue yes, because I think you can have a great CEO who has a knack on the market and has an idea, but I've rarely met a CEO that is able to translate that into reality. And I think both as a CPTO or CTO, right, you're there to feed off of these ideas from the CEO, plus give your ideas in, but you're there to bring reality to the situation and say, okay, I hear what you want out of it, and this is how we can probably do it with what we have or what the market has or what technology allows us right now.
Interesting. Anything to add to that, Hizam?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if they're born out of CEOs. I mean, if it's a startup, usually the CEO, it's founder-led, right? Like they're really defining the product, and they are maybe the product owner, and they're taking a lot of risk, so they just want to experiment and build something, and they need a team to go build on it. But as they grow, now they have product market fit, they need to have dedicated functions that go do user research, understand the market better, work with the customers to define product strategy. I don't think the CEO necessarily has the capacity for that anymore. Whether it's born out of the CEO or not, I don't know, right? But I think you need someone to go and work on those areas.
But it's also sorry. It also depends, like whether the CEO comes from the industry he's building the company in. If he has an expertise, so then he can be the CPO up to some point. But if not, because he just saw a business opportunity and decided to go into that industry, maybe he'll just have the ideas. But even at the early stage, he won't be acting as the CPO.
I think I expect every executive, top executive leading a department in an organization to be a kind of an entrepreneur, right? So I guess both should be maybe born kind of mini CEOs for their department, but reporting into the executive circle.
We see this a lot in early stage businesses where the founder both defines the business strategy and the vision, but also the product strategy. So those two things are very, very closely linked, and they have more of an execution mechanism within the engineering and product teams. But the business gets to a certain point in their growth stage where the functions of engineering and product need maturing. You know, they need greater levels of structure, process, governance, and it's typically at that point where the founder says, I'd still like to own vision, but I need somebody to help me put order into a world of chaos, and that's when we get into conversations about the dual role. You know, is this context? And I think it does depend. I think that's one of the biggest takeaways. It depends, but is it viable? Yeah, that's what we see quite frequently. I'm conscious of time. Are we good? Okay. Last question. With a combined CTPO role, do all the engineering managers need product skills too? If so, how do you... Oh, it's gone. How do you find enough people with that experience?
This is the question, how to find the people? It's a good
Well,
question.
But
I don't know.
I guess do all engineering managers need... yeah, good hiring. Do all engineering managers need product skills too? I think that's probably the crux of the question there.
I would say we were talking about like business, having the business acumen. I think they don't need product skills per se, but they need to have this product acumen, like they have the sensitivity, like to be customer centric, to understand that they are working with in engineering teams, they are implementing products, they are developing products, but they need to understand why are we doing this. Who are the end users? And for instance, they don't have to be, as I said, they don't need to have the product skills, but for instance, they can be curious enough to ask someone who is in the product, like, how do you conduct your test? Maybe I can assist to one session, and the discussions that you have with the end users, but to really understand the product, the product management process. But they don't need to be product managers or to have actually product skills, but at least understand them.
So be conscious of the what are we building it, why are we building it, and who are we building it for.
Exactly.
And not necessarily be product managers themselves.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think also being comfortable to challenge the what, the why, right? So not just, and also equally product folks to understand technology to an extent they can challenge the how. Right, and that's that healthy challenge, not the critical, making life difficult challenging, but as in just being inquisitive, wanting to learn and understand, and then also challenging. Okay, I understand that, but what about this, and so on. And I think, how can you find enough people? I think it's all about actually our responsibility at the top level to educate, to instill a culture of learning and sharing knowledge. And I think that's the best way you can find the people. Yes, you can go out and you can bring in consultancies to help, but you can also, in your own company, help grow the knowledge within your teams by sharing that knowledge.
But I have one question. Don't you think it will be easier for the technical people to to fill that gap, that on the other way? Because you say they can challenge the products, but in the meantime, do you think that it will be easier? It will be easy for someone who's only product oriented, who has only experience in product, to challenge someone on the technical choices they're making, like on the how?
I think both ways are possible. I've had very awesome folks, been fortunate to work with them, that they can challenge either way. So, head of product manager, challenging the technology in a safe space and way of doing it. And often it comes down to, not all the information is being made apparent. So they say, well, why are you approaching it that way? Because we just need something that we can throw away. Yeah, so, well, you need to throw it away. Well, I didn't know that, right? So you can challenge, I think, both ways, yeah.
I have a slightly different view. I think it's not necessarily in the challenge. It's trust but verify. Right? There's the concept of problem validation and solution validation. I think everybody needs to challenge each other and validate it. Also, like, I think it was subconscious bias that we refer to as the CEO always as him or I think it can be anybody, right? So, but once again, I think I don't think it's easier or harder, but validating is important. And I try to use the term of, like, validate the solution, right? Just because it's built, it may not necessarily solve the problem. So the product manager needs to go and validate and challenge, like, hey, the solution doesn't solve the problem.
That was really great. Yeah, this is the problem validation and solution validation. Both are so important, and I think this, and that's why I believe we need everyone and everyone in the company should be having some idea of those things. And I mentioned, I don't know if you're familiar with the Aristotle project from Google. I don't know. Yeah. So every 10 years, Google tries to find out and throws a lot of money into the void to find out what is the best performance, what are the factors or the vectors for a very high performing team. And first time they had like 12 features. Then they decided some years ago, like, oh no, we only need 5 because it's easier to remember. And they have this pyramid, right? And at the top of the pyramid it says impact and meaning. And I think impact is meaning, like, really, how do they contribute to the business? Are they really doing something which is forwarding the business towards their goals? And I think this needs to be had at every level, at least at the managers. The managers need to know this so they can remind each other, right? In a meeting, maybe like, hey, we are leaving right now our business goal. We're diverting. Can we go back to there? So this is very helpful.
Thank you so much for your insights. I know that we're standing in the way of drinks, beers.
Yes, thank you.
Standing in my way.
We're going to standing in your way. We're going to release everybody. But no, thank you so much for your insights. Really valuable.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.